In His grace, God gave us a sequential end-time timeline that was hidden in the Psalms for thousands of years, waiting to be discovered. It has now been revealed here at the last minutes of the church age. This channel discusses end-time prophecy from the unique perspective of the encrypted timeline in the Psalms. If you want to know where we are on the timeline, please subscribe and take some time to watch the other videos on this channel. Also, please consider purchasing a copy of Encrypted, Unlocking the Timeline Revelation in the Psalms. Not only will it help you to better understand the time we're living in, but it will also be a very important book to leave behind. God bless you. So, welcome. Glad to be here. This was a rough week. Not like in a way that's really that out of the ordinary, but just very busy. Trying to finish that 1973 Nova SS, and which is still sitting outside right now, but I'm done, and so he just has to pick it up.
Very good.
So I'm pretty happy about that. Turned out that there were a lot of crazy things wrong with that car, and before he gives it to his son for a wedding present, he wanted me to fix all these things and go through it, and so I'm finally done with all that. Ended up getting some bad parts here and there, and trying to just basically chasing my tail, trying to figure out why is this not working. Well, right out of the box. We live in a world now where parts aren't what they used to be. And I'll just leave it at that. So this week, I was trying to finish up my study on the 7 churches of the Tribulation, which I'm just going to say I'm really, really excited about. However, as of this morning, I came in really early to try to finish it, and I realized somewhere 9 or 10 o'clock or so, it ain't going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen. So I had to shift gears. I had another little study that I had started writing, and I thought, well, I could probably finish that up really fast, and that way we don't just cancel tonight. That turned out to be really, really complicated too, more so than I thought. It seems a little undone, but instead of canceling tonight, I thought I'll just try to wing it. I will go through what I've written today. I went from like a 3-page thing to a 7-page thing, and we'll just see what happens. So anyway, long story short, we're still doing our Menorah series, so everything that we're doing, I always like to do timelines. Mm-hmm. Well, now we're seeing all of these and how they fit on the Menorah. And so, let's just recap really quick. Well, let me just tell you what we're doing tonight. Wait, I can't remember what we're doing tonight. What are we doing tonight? Okay, we're not doing the 7 churches, Karl. We're doing the 7 days of Holy Week, since it's Passover coming up. So, real quick as a recap. Let's see. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen how Jesus always appears 3 times in a 7. Okay? We've used the menorah to demonstrate this biblical pattern, as we have seen on the 7,000-year creation timeline. And on the 7-year tribulation timeline, Jesus is always the beginning. He's the Aleph, and he's the Alpha, and the end, the Tav or Omega. But just as importantly, he is and always appears in the middle, the For, the Delet, the Door. Okay? So, Passover is fast approaching, right? In fact, on the Essene calendar, we're in Passover right now. But no one is observing that calendar. And I have a hunch that the Lord isn't going to carry out his final days on necessarily, I don't know, I can't speak for him, but on the Essene calendar, because really nobody is aware of it. I think he's going to want to do things on the Jewish Hallel calendar because that's what they are looking at. And so how would he get their attention if he's on a calendar they're not even aware exists anymore? Does that make sense? That's just my hunch. Again, I'm not really totally sure about that. So as I mentioned, Passover is fast approaching. In fact, we're only a week away, or we're actually in it if we're on the Essene calendar, So I thought I would briefly discuss the timeline of what many Christians call Holy Week and see how it connects to the bigger picture of God's prophetic patterns. I had extensively researched this topic years ago and found that the timeline of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem and subsequent death, burial, and resurrection, the timeline we Christians have all understood and celebrated over the centuries, has to be completely false. It doesn't fit in God's pattern at all. As we have been seeing over the last few weeks, God always reveals his prophetic timeline in patterns around the number 7, and there's always another story hidden within a story. As previously stated, Jesus is the beginning, the end, but also, and maybe most importantly, the middle at the 4 position on the timeline. Why would God deviate from this pattern during the most important 7 days in human history? The 7-day week when his son died for our sins? The answer is he wouldn't, and he didn't. For some reason, we have been lied to for many centuries. Years ago, when I was doing research into this, I didn't really care to trace the history of this lie, or even the reason why. I'm guessing it was corrupted by the Catholic Church, or priests, or whoever, I don't know, back when pagan practices were introduced. But that was never high on my list of things to do. So I really didn't investigate any of that. I did teach about this once at church around the time of Passover, but I've never really broadcast this. However, now here at the end, I think we have enough evidence to know that God always uses a 7, and his son is always 1, 4, and 7. He doesn't deviate. This teaching may offend some people, actually. A lot of people might get bent out of shape hearing this. And many simply won't want to hear it because we find comfort in our customs and simple understandings of history. But the truth is that the story... Well, at least they're not coming for you, Ruth. So, I don't know if you can hear it, but there's sirens in the background.
A lot of them.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. But the truth is that the story we've been fed doesn't add up. According to church tradition, through the Catholic Church, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a Sunday, called Palm Sunday, was hung on a cross on Friday, called Good Friday, and resurrected on Sunday morning, Easter Sunday. Even leaving out all of the pagan stuff, none of that makes any sense on God's established timeline or even in the customs of the Jewish Passover. So if you don't know anything about Judaism and all that, you'd think you could go along with this. But once you study all that, it's like, none of this adds up. So have you ever wondered why Jesus and his disciples celebrated the Passover seder, what we call the Last Supper, the day before Passover? See, these are questions I had originally years ago and thought, wait a minute, why is this? But when you just read the story, you don't really think about it. Have you ever wondered how you can cram 3 literal days and nights into 1.5 days, Friday evening until Sunday morning? These are some of the questions that never added up for me and sent me on a quest to uncover the true timeline of the week that changed human history forever. And back then, I didn't have the insight into the timeline hidden in the Psalms or the Menorah to help connect the dots, but we do now. So now we can see it because we can actually put it on this timeline. I have a 25-page teaching that I shared at church back in 2022 that goes into great detail on this very subject. But I'm not going to put you all through that today, because that would have honestly been the easy thing to do. Instead of writing this and trying to condense it and refigure it out, because I haven't really thought about any of this in 3 years now, I could have just dusted that off, but I'd be feeding you guys with a fire hose again, and I did that 3 years ago, and it was just too much. A lot of blank stares and like, what is this guy talking about, man? It's just like, anyway. So here is the condensed version, and as you will see, it fits on God's prophetic, the pattern of 7, we'll call it, okay? That we can easily see on the menorah. Okay. Jesus rode into, we'll start at the beginning. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on Shabbat Hagadol. You remember me talking about that? Mm-hmm. That's the great Sabbath as it's known to the Jews. This was in fulfillment of Zechariah 9:9, a very important prophetic passage. It was the 10th of Abib, or Nisan, on the Essene calendar, because they hadn't corrupted their calendar like the calendar used by the Pharisees and Sadducees. So what I'm trying to say there is Abib is the actual name of the month on God's calendar. The Hebrew, the current calendar, calls it Nisan, but that's a corrupted calendar name. Pagan, in fact. So on the Essene calendar, the 10th of Abib, or Nisan, would always fall on the second Shabbat of the year. Shabbat being Sabbath. Okay. So because of that, the way God's calendar actually worked, and the way the Essene calendar works, because that was the calendar that was given to Moses and Aaron, every year they know what to expect because everything falls on the exact same day. So we'll kind of get into it a little bit. By riding on the colt of a donkey, Jesus was finally and fully revealed as the Messiah, Zechariah 9:9, and the sacrificial lamb, Isaiah 53:7. The crowd of pilgrims who were in the city for the Passover celebration recognized Jesus as the Messiah and sang Psalm 118:25 through 26, Hosanna, Hosanna, or in Hebrew, Hoshia. Why can't I say this? Because I can say it in my head, but I can't get it out of my mouth. Hoshayana. Okay. It's Hoshayana, which means save us now. The crowd then acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah by calling him the Son of David, which was a term reserved for the Messiah. The crowds also spread their cloaks on the road, which was a gesture reserved for a king. That's from 2 Kings 9:13. Obviously, they knew to expect the Messiah that day, or they wouldn't have made such a fuss about a man riding on a donkey. This must have been a daily occurrence, like a guy how many people rode in on donkeys? However, they knew all of the prophecies. They knew when to expect the Messiah from the prophet Daniel, who had given them an exact calculation. More than likely, now I'm cutting a lot out of here, okay? So if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, I don't really know what to tell you. Besides, study it for yourself. But basically, they knew because, from the time that the decree goes forth, and, you can calculate all of that. And I've talked about that before, so I know it's in previous videos. So more than likely, those who were shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna, were Essenes, because they were the ones who knew exactly what day to expect him. Okay. By the way, the 10th of Nisan is this coming Tuesday on the Jewish calendar. It's already passed on the Essene calendar back on the 29th of March. Between the different calendars, this can get really confusing, so I'm going to try to keep it more general and stick to the Essene calendar for this study, since it doesn't move around. Okay, this is where I got caught up today. Spent the vast majority of my day looking at calendars, drawing out calendars, using a sliding scale, and until my head was about to explode, and I just thought, oh my goodness, okay, I got to settle on one calendar because I'm going back and forth, and it was kind of driving me crazy. And then when you add in the Gregorian calendar to try to explain it to a Western audience, oh boy. Okay, so according to Deuteronomy 12, each man was to take a lamb for his family on the 10th day of the first month. On the Essene calendar, that would always be on a Sabbath because the days were fixed. Their days didn't move around. Their year always started on a Wednesday, and therefore every day aligned after that, okay? For them, the year always began on the 4th day of the week, which is Wednesday evening, to us. So I threw in there the evening, because remember, their day started the evening. That makes it really confusing for me, anyway. So it was very easy to keep track of the appointed holidays, which are Moedim, and they were also dress rehearsals for things that were prophetic, still to come. So on our 7-day menorah timeline, you can see that the lamb was selected just before the official 7-day count begins. Aren't we also lambs and sheep? We know that those of us who follow the Good Shepherd are likened to sheep, but what about lambs? I'm getting at a point here. Isaiah 20:11, he will feed his flock like a shepherd. He will gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom and gently lead those who are with young. Could that be a rapture? Okay, I'm getting at something here. The lambs were judged and selected prior to the beginning of the 7. That's a picture of the rapture of the church hidden in Exodus 12. We will also be judged and selected prior to the official beginning of the final week of years known as the 7-year tribulation. So if I had had time today to draw up a timeline on a menorah, you would see right now, before the first day of the week begins, the first day is a Sunday, okay, to the Jews and the Essenes. Well, they didn't call it Sunday, but that's a pagan name, first day of the week. So the lamb was selected before the first day on the Shabbat, known as Shabbat Haggadol, which was the 10th day of the first month of the year. Okay? So, just as the rapture will happen before the tribulation begins, the tribulation being lined up with the first day, okay, of the week. Let's see. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good. Today, the Jews are on what is called the Hillel II calendar. Without going into great detail, it was corrupted a long time ago, which was actually prophesied in the book of Jubilees, by the way. On this calendar, the Jews have reckoned that Shabbat Haggadol is simply the Sabbath before the Passover, no matter what date it falls on, even though Deuteronomy 12 tells them exactly it needs to be on the 10th day. They just arbitrarily said, well, whatever the Sabbath before is, so it doesn't have to be on the 10th anymore. It just made all that up. So that means it's not necessarily on the 10th of the first month any longer for the Jews. Okay, so let's return back to Exodus 12. After selecting their lambs on the 10th day of Abib or Nisan, each Israelite family was to bring their lamb to their home, observe it, and take care of it until the 14th day of the month. That's when they were to slaughter it at twilight, meaning 3 p.m. So they got to know the lamb personally for 4 days, and then they had to kill it and eat it. Kind of terrible.
Yeah.
But think about that in context, okay? Jesus being the Lamb of God, okay? A personal, the lamb became personal to the family.
Yeah.
You see how all these things tie in together? So, after riding into Jerusalem on the 10th day, Shabbat Haggadol, Jesus was observed and rigorously questioned by the Jews for 4 days, wasn't he? Boy, they came after him with everything.
Yeah.
That was in fulfillment of Exodus 12, 1 through 6. Exactly as God had instructed the Israelites to observe their Passover lambs for 4 days. Okay, you see how those things align. On that 4th day, Jesus was hung on a cross, which was the 14th day. Okay, the 14th day of the month, first month. He died at the 9th hour, according to the Gospels. That's exactly twilight, or 3 p.m., the very same hour when the sacrificial lambs were being slaughtered at the temple. Of course, Jesus died on the 4th day. He's the number 4, the Dalet, the door. Okay, he didn't die on a Friday. Backing up for a moment. Here's where it gets confusing. Jesus ate the Passover seder, known as the Last Supper to us, on the evening, which is also the beginning of the 15th day on the Essene calendar as directed by Exodus 12. I believe that was the beginning of the 14th day on the Jewish calendar that year. So it looks like their calendars were 1 day off that year of the year that Jesus was crucified. And I know, see, that's where my head was spinning today, because I had so many different timelines I was drawing out and calendars and moving things around. But where it got confusing is mainly, so I know they were one day off.
Yeah.
Okay. Forget about the Friday thing, because that's not even a thing. That's just baloney. But where I was getting messed up was the Shabbat Haggadah. And then I remember, wait a minute, the Jews, even in Jesus' time, they already had a corrupted calendar. It didn't have to be 4 days before. It was just whenever. See, all that was out the window. So now it's starting to make more sense. So after eating the Passover meal, Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane on Wednesday night / Thursday morning. He was there for quite a while. Remember, Wednesday night for us is the beginning of their new day.
Yeah.
So that on the Essene calendar, which was Tuesday night / Wednesday morning on the Jewish calendar, because they're one day off. He was hung on a cross and later died at the same hour when the Passover lambs were slaughtered, as I mentioned, which was again 3 p.m. on Wednesday. That's the 4th day of the week on the Jewish calendar. So a lot of this was happening on the Jewish calendar, so that the Jews had really no way to say this wasn't real. Like, look, it lines up exactly on your calendar, okay? So it worked on the Essene calendar for Shabbat Haggadah, and then he ate the Passover meal. In John's Gospel also, he points out about the Moedim. He will say several times, as I recall, I don't have any of this written down, but as I recall, he would say the feast or the festival of the Jews, making a distinction between the one that they were keeping, which would have been the Essene calendar, and the Jews. In other words, what he was saying was they're on a different calendar. So we've got our day that we're celebrating, but they're celebrating this on their calendar. Okay. Jesus was placed in a tomb before sundown that same day before the high Sabbath of Passover began, which began the 15th day of the month. By our reckoning, being Westerners with the Gregorian calendar, he was in the grave from Wednesday evening until Thursday evening. That's one night and day. And then Thursday evening until Friday evening. That's 2 nights and days. And then Friday evening until after Saturday evening. That's 3 nights and 3 days. Sometime after the Sabbath and a full 3 nights and 3 days, Jesus rose to fulfill the Feast of First Fruits. And we know that he was the first fruit, right? 1 Corinthians 15:20. So here's the key. He had to be in the grave for 3 full days and nights to fulfill the sign of Jonah, because Jesus himself declared, Matthew 12:40, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." You can't get around that. There's no way you can make Friday, so you got basically Friday night, then all day Saturday, and then maybe Saturday night. That's 1 whole day and 2 nights. Either Jesus was lying and prophecy is nonsense, or the Menorah calendar still stands for a 7-day week in this case, and Jesus died on the 4th day, on Wednesday, to our reckoning. And then had 3 full days and 3 full nights in the grave. Okay? The Bible doesn't lie. The Bible doesn't... We have to stop listening to nonsense from generations past that just makes no sense. And when you start asking questions, you can start poking holes in all of the things that were customary. And... But anyway, sorry, I digress. So that's why a Friday crucifixion simply isn't possible. There's only, at most, 1 day and 2 nights between a Friday evening burial and a Sunday morning resurrection. What has always been confusing to us Christians is the fact that there were 2 preparation days and 2 Sabbaths that week. So when you're reading the Gospels, you're reading about preparation day and all this kind of stuff. Well, there were 2 of them that week. Okay? Not to mention that we're dealing with 3 different calendars and different start times for the days. Okay, so that week when Jesus was crucified, there was a high holy day Sabbath of Pesach, or Pesach. We know as Passover. and later the regular weekly Sabbath on that Saturday. Now they may have been like butt to butt, like, I shouldn't say that, back to back. So there could have been like, I don't know, there could have been a preparation day and then a Sabbath, and then immediately following that another Sabbath. So, but I don't know. This is the part that makes my head explode. Actually, when I'm trying to figure all this out with the 3 different calendars and start times of the days and stuff, it's enough to make you crazy. So, the Last Supper on the Essene calendar was on a Wednesday evening, which was also the beginning of the 15th day for them, the Essenes. But to the Jews, I believe their Passover Seder was 1 day later that year on their calendar. That's how Jesus could eat the Passover meal with his disciples 1 full day before the Jews ate their Passover meal. That answers the question.
Yep.
That way, Jesus could also be the Passover lamb at the very time the Jews were slaughtering their Passover lambs prior to the Jewish Seder. Because think about it, the way that the calendar works out, he died at 3 o'clock when the Passover lambs were slaughtered. Mm-hmm. About 3 hours later, they were eaten. Okay, 3 hours later, roughly, when sun goes down, that's the start of the next day. So, when you read Exodus 12, select the lamb on the 10th, kill the lamb on the 14th, but it's later in the day on the 14th, and then immediately following that, a few hours later, on the 15th, have the meal. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's not 24 hours later, it's literally just a few hours later, but it gets really confusing. Okay, so, one side note. By that time, the Essenes no longer ate lamb at their Passover meal. This answers another question. They knew that the temple had been corrupted by the Sadducees and Pharisees. That made the temple sacrifices also corrupted. So they ate unleavened bread instead of meat at their Passover meals. That sounds like the Last Supper, doesn't it? Because do you remember anything in the Bible about meat?
Nope.
So there was no mention of lamb or anything like that being eaten at the Last Supper in the Gospels. It makes sense to me that the Lamb of God didn't eat the corrupted sacrifices of the Jews. Prophetically, Isaiah 1 rebukes the Jews and tells us that the Lord had enough of their empty sacrifices. Go to the Old Testament and you see what's coming. Isaiah 1, 10 through 11. Hear the word of the Lord, you rulers of Sodom. Boy, God's mad. Give ear to the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. He's likening them to the ones that he... To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices to me, says the Lord. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed cattle. I do not delight in the blood of bulls or of lambs or goats. Okay, so he then tells them what he really wants from them instead, which was for them to repent. That was, I'm narrowing it down, but that was his message to them and us, then and now and in the future. Isaiah 1, 16 through 17 continues. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, put away that you... Kind of sounds like you're actually doing something, right? You're not just hanging out. He's telling you, wash yourselves, make yourselves clean. Put away the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Rebuke the oppressor. Defend the fatherless. Plead for the widow. All right, so we've gone through Jesus' arrival, Shabbat Haggadol, how he fulfilled that. Then that, to me, is likened to the rapture. Okay? We've seen that on the 4th day was the day that Jesus was crucified. That aligns with the menorah. Of course he was on the 4th day. That's Jesus, the door. He made, that's the day that the door became open for us to be saved. I mean, you can't really get around that. What does Friday have to do with that? Nothing. Friday is the 6th day of the week. That may be more of an Antichrist day than anything. So I don't know. I don't want to get into all that. The pagan part of, all of this. But okay, on our 7-day Holy Week timeline, as if I had one to show you, when I wrote this, I thought I would, but I ran out of day. Jesus was in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, which fulfilled the sign of Jonah, just as Jesus taught. That was Thursday, the 5th, like we're talking complete days here. Thursday, the 5th day, Friday, the 6th day, and Saturday, the 7th day. He then resurrected sometime around the end of the 7th day Sabbath, which would have been around sundown or after that Saturday, which is the beginning of the first day of the week, Sunday, on the Jewish calendar. Now, we can see that Jesus once again fulfilled the Menorah's prophetic pattern of 7. He came to Jerusalem on or before the first day of the week and gave, let me do that again, because that's kind of important. Now we can see Jesus once again fulfilled the Menorah's prophetic pattern of 7. He came to Jerusalem on, actually before the first day of the week, and he gave his life for ours on the 4th day of the week. He is the number 4, the door. I'm just always going to keep saying that. He then rose on or shortly after the Sabbath, the 7th day. I would say that it was after, because he completed the full days. Bonus, think about this. After his resurrection, Jesus was first seen by a woman, Mary Magdalene. I wonder if she, once again, a woman, might represent the new Christ-following and repentant remnant of Israel, who will be the refined and perfected Proverbs 31 woman. Do you see how God reveals prophecy in patterns? Of course it was a woman. Because Israel, the remnant, is likened to a woman. It's a woman who escapes into the wilderness, right? Of course it was a woman that first saw him. Because when he comes back, that's who he's coming back for. He's coming back to let the captives free out of the refuge that they've been in for 3.5 years, and they're likened to a woman. Now let's look at the tribulation timeline menorah. At the rapture/resurrection, those of us who are still alive will follow those who have previously passed away to our own triumphal entry into the heavenly Jerusalem before the final week of 7 begins, just as Jesus did on that Shabbat Haggadol almost 2,000 years ago. Can you see our triumphal entry into the heavenly Jerusalem? Okay, just saying, Shabbat, well, not Shabbat Haggadol, but Nisan 10, which is what that's supposed to be on. I mean, it's all messed up, but that's Tuesday next week. I had a dream the other day about Nisan 10. It's kind of funny dream, because I'm a car guy, and I guess God, I don't know what's going to happen, but I don't know. Okay, I'm going to put this out there, because it's kind of silly. But I woke up, and I had Nisan 10 in my head. But the funny thing is, because like I said, I'm a car guy, so it was a car. It was a Nissan, but instead of like a Sentra or an Altima or a Maxima or whatever they call it, I'm not really a Nissan guy, but it was called a Nissan 10, and there was something wrong with the car. And so I'm thinking, Lord, okay, I get it, I'm silly, and I'm a car guy, and so if you're talking to me about Nissan 10, that's Tuesday. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if anything. It could have just been that I had a bad bit of beef or a undercooked potato, as from the Christmas Carol. So I don't know. But I mean, when you wake up and you have a specific thing like that wakes you up, it's like, well, I don't know. And like literally that's next week. And with everything going on in the world, I don't know. So anyway, similar, God must know I'm silly, and that's why he gives me silly things like that.
He's got a sense of humor.
Yeah, I believe he, absolutely.
Yes.
I mean, who created humor?
Yes.
You know, we think God's all home, or what? No, I don't think so.
No.
All right, moving on. So similar to how Jesus was slain in the middle of the week, The Antichrist will also be slain in the middle of the 7 years. However, according to prophecy, he will not be crucified as Jesus was. He will suffer a mortal head wound, and his arm will be severed in some way. My guess is that many Jews, now this is just me hypothesizing, many Jews will finally realize that they've been deceived, that he's deceived them, and one of them will try to assassinate him after he declares himself to be God. I mean, can kind of see that playing out. That's when the remnant of Israel will have to flee into the wilderness. At that time, in the middle of the tribulation, Jesus will return to defend and shepherd the remnant of Israel to the refuge where they will be protected for the final 3.5 years. Then, at the end of the 7 years, so really after the 7 years, like right after, okay, Jesus and his Leah bride, which is us, the church, will return to defeat the enemies of God and set the remnant of Israel, Rachel, free in preparation for their marriage. Now, we're already married. At that time, at the close of the 7th year, the tribulation saints will be resurrected. Remember? Just as Jesus was resurrected at the close of the 7th day of Holy Week as the first fruit of the resurrection. You can't make this stuff up, and once you see it, there it is.
Yeah.
You know, amen and hallelujah. Because if I had the Menorah timeline behind me, you could literally see this, and I'm hoping. So I'll edit this and I'll produce those and put it up there. So if you watch for the video, you'll see it. Now here's something else interesting about Nissan 10. Not the car, not the hypothetical car. Israel crossed over the River Jordan at the end of their 40 years in the wilderness on Nissan 10. That's found in Joshua chapter 4. Okay, there's other things about Nissan 10, but I ran out of time. I didn't get to really go through all of that. But isn't that interesting when you think about the crossing over the Jordan, and then you get the connection with a triumphal entry? Well, they kind of had a triumphal entry into, the land flowing with milk and honey. So, I don't know. Tuesday's pretty close. But I still believe wholeheartedly that Gog-Magog has to happen, the war. That's, we see, and then we see the vultures, and then. And so, I think with the way things are going right now, we could literally be looking at that, May, June, because between Trump and Netanyahu, I almost said Obama. Why in the world did I say Obama? My head's so scrambled today, I'm sorry. But between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, I mean, they're really pushing, obviously, Iran into a corner, Turkey's making all kinds of waves, we got Syria's a mess. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on right now. I know everybody keeps saying, you hear this on the news, that we've been hearing it for 3 years now at least, that Iran is 2 weeks away from having nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Personally, I think they have them. I think they're building their stockpile, and I believe that there was a purpose for our doors here in America to be wide open for 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
And so we might be in for some turbulent times before the rapture. I'm just saying. I mean, we're not promised a rose garden. We're not promised anything better in this country than anybody else has around the world. And Christians are persecuted, and killed for their faith more now around the world than ever before.
Yeah.
And so, we should be prayed up for sure. Not just for ourselves, obviously, because we need to be praying for others and our Christian brothers and sisters around the world. So that's it. Next week, God willing, we will do the 7 churches, and be prepared because it's going to be big. It's going to be long. I mean, it'd probably be about a 2-hour study is my guess, because I'm over 20 pages right now, right around 20 pages, and I'm nowhere near done. So we'll just, but then after that, we'll have a week off. I'll need it.
No.
So we took a little break, and But now's the time when we get to talk about our mission, if we choose to accept it. And this goes for everybody watching. So your mission this week, if you choose to accept it, is to take a media fast, a day, maybe the whole week. I mean, obviously we have to watch the news or whatever, know what's going on in the world, but fast from the endless scrolling and all that sort of thing, from just watching mind-numbing things, and use that time more wisely to spend with the Lord in reading His Word. Okay, that's how we know the Lord, is through reading His Word and in prayer. And I think if we can do that, we need to always be careful. Maybe that's not the right word. We need to always be working on, maybe that's not the right word, but I'm going to use that, our relationship with the Lord as a marriage. Think about it. If I just take my wife for granted, right, we're not going to have a great marriage. I need to actively be part of and work on our marriage. And so that's the same with our... Didn't Jesus liken our relationship with Him as a marriage? So, I mean, get a clue. We need to be an active participant in this relationship. And communicate, yeah, because that's what prayer is. We need to communicate, and we need to want, not just, oh man, begrudgingly, I don't really want to read the Bible, I don't really want to do this. He doesn't want that kind of a sacrifice, does he? He wants a sacrifice that shouldn't be a sacrifice. We should long to spend time with Him. I mean, we're all guilty because we're busy and we're thinking, well, I got this to do, that to do, but we should seek Him first, and everything else will be added. So that's the mission this week, and I just want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for coming. And also, thank you for praying for this ministry. Thank you for praying for Ruth. And there are other prayer requests that I see on the comments regularly, and I really appreciate that, and we are praying for you. And I want to say thank you to those who have been very charitable and have given. And last thing is, the t-shirts arrived. They're in a box. I don't have a lot of them. We did a small order, but they look really good. Cool. And I've got to figure out how to actually market, like sell them online or something. I don't know how to do all that. So I'm just a guy in an old shop, so I'll figure all that out. But what we may do in the beginning, before I figure this out, is to just do like, you've heard other little ministries do like, for a gift of $1,000, I'll send you one t-shirt plus 7 free blessings this week. So, no, it'll be less than $1,000, I promise. So anyway, sorry I had to throw that in there. Anyway, God bless. Take care.